I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and we're here today with our review of the SRS A1 from Desert Tech. Now, SRS stands for Stealth Recon Scout, and this is a bullpup bolt-action rifle designed by Desert Tech, and it really has some very interesting features. Now, this is a premium rifle, and it does come at a premium price, but there are some very, very high-end features on this rifle that I think helps bring it up to the level of that premium price tag. The main feature of the rifle is this is a switch caliber rifle, so you can very easily in the field with small lightweight hand tools change the barrel and change the caliber of the rifle very quickly and easily. In addition, this rifle will allow you to go from short action calibers such as the .308 Winchester all the way up to long action magnum calibers such as the .338 Lapua Magnum. So very easily you could take this rifle out into the field in a short barrel .308 format, get to a position and then switch the rifle over to a long .338 Lapua Magnum or 300 Win Mag, etc., and be able to really reach out with the rifle. So it's very interesting that it has that capability. Now, in addition to having that capability, whereas before you might actually have to have one barreled action or one whole rifle for a short action caliber and then another whole rifle for that long action Magnum, here you have one system that does it all, so it allows you to mount one optic to that system that does it all, instead of having to switch an optic from one rifle to the other. So the first thing that we wanted to do when Desert Tech sent this rifle out to us is we wanted to take it out and we wanted to see how repeatably these barrels return to zero when we switch them out. Ideally, what you would want to be able to do is decide that today I'm going to go to the range and I'm going to shoot this match and I'm going to need a 6.5 Creedmoor. So you would slap the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel in, torque it down, and then set your zero to the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel based on what you have recorded in your data book. If you're going out the next day and say you were just going to go do a barricade training session and you didn't want to put the mileage on your match barrel, you could switch out for a 308 barrel, go back, look at your data book, dial in the zero for the 308 barrel, and go. That gives you a whole lot of utility to systems like this. So we took the SRS A1 out to the range and we started off by getting it zeroed with the 308 barrel in it. Got everything dialed in, shot half-inch groups for 5 shots at 100 yards repeatedly with the rifle, so no problem with accuracy right out of the box with the Desert Tech Premium Match ammo. We then switched it over and we went with the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel and fired some shots, got it zeroed in. Again, excellent accuracy. We were getting sub half-inch groups at 100 yards with the Desert Tech 6.5 Creedmoor Premium Match ammo. We fired those groups and then we went back and we swapped the barrel back to the 308, dialed our zero back in based on what we previously had, shot groups, we were good to go. We were within 1 minute angle. We were actually within 0.2 of a mil to get the group back in with the 308 barrel. So I figure, you know, within 1 minute angle seems to be what most guys expect out of a switch barrel system, but I wasn't incredibly impressed with that. So we went again and we pulled the 308 barrel out, and then we put the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel back in, dialed the zero back on the rifle, and we were dead on with the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel. So there was no zero shift with the 6.5 Creedmoor, taking it out and reinstalling it. And we went through this process several times, removing the barrel, shooting a group, reinstalling a different barrel, shooting a group. And what we found was the 308 barrel had a little bit of zero shift within about 0.2 of a mil of the zero. It tended to stay a little bit low and it would shift a little left, a little right, but the elevation was pretty good on it. The 6.5 Creedmoor barrel returned perfectly to zero. We didn't have to fine-tune the zero at all with the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel. And again, it was shooting 5-shot groups at 100 yards under a half-inch, so the accuracy is there with that system. So the switch barrel gets an absolute thumbs up there. I don't know if there was maybe a little bit of extra slack when we get the barrel in. After we got it done and got back, it dawned on me that I wasn't loading the barrel to one side or the other when I slid it back and torqued it down. So it may be when you go to install the barrel, make sure that you have it, if you decide you want to twist it clockwise after it's seated every time, then twist it clockwise every time before you tighten these guys down. And maybe if there's a little bit of side-to-side slack in there, you'll tighten that up. But unfortunately, we're outside of our test period, so we didn't get a chance to go back and test that. But again, the 6.5 Creedmoor barrel that they sent was absolutely perfect return to zero, so no problem at all there. And that's great, because what that tells me is you can go out and you can buy 2 barrels for this guy. Let's say you want to shoot a barrel burning caliber, a fast 6mm. Well, you can go out and you buy 2 barrels for it. You can shoot the first barrel, get it zeroed. You can take your spare barrel, shoot it, and get the zero shift for that spare barrel, log it into your book, write it on a tag and stick it on the barrel. And then if you go to a match, say it's a couple of day match, you can have that barrel in reserve, and if for some reason your barrel goes out during the match, you can switch over to your spare barrel and get going and be right in there. Be right on as soon as you dial that zero back in. So that's a huge benefit there. Now, the barrel is great, but let's talk about the action and the trigger, because that is where the Bullpup design really gets a lot of its bad reputation, I would guess I'd say. With the Desert Tech SRS A1, you do have the bolt handle, and the bolt handle operates within the area that your face would be behind the receiver. So when you unlock the bolt and bring it back to the rear, now the bolt is occupying the same place that your face would be if you were shooting support side. Now, before we go any further, I will say that the SRS A1 is available in a left-handed version, so if you are primarily a left-handed shooter, you can get this rifle in a left-handed version. However, the version that we have here to test is the right-handed version, which is the most common. A lot of guys bring up comments about the way the bolt handle operates because they say support side shooting is much more difficult with the Bullpup. So of course we took it out and we did quite a bit of support side shooting, and what I found on it is that it is really no problem at all to shoot at support side. The fact that my face was laying on the open track here didn't cause any pain or discomfort, except for the one time that I did get some beard hair caught up between the skin and the receiver, and it pulled out a few hairs. Well, for shooting ARs with a beard, you know, that's just part of life. At some point, you are going to lose some beard hair in the stock. You just live with it and drive on. But we had no problem shooting at support side. The only issue is that when you go to operate the bolt, you do have to lift your face off the side of the stock in order to run that bolt. You get used to it very quickly, and it's very quick to run the bolt and get back on. Of course, the big drawback is you will lose sight of your target when you move your face off of it, whereas when you're shooting strong side, you can keep your eyes on the target as you cycle the bolt. Now, another comment that I always got was, if the bolt handle being further to the rear causes any issues with fast bolt manipulation, and I did not find any issues with it once I got used to where the bolt handle was at. That means when I come off the pistol grip, instead of coming straight up to the bolt handle, I come off the pistol grip and come back to the bolt handle, because you'll see when the bolt handle is closed and locked down, it is much further back than we would normally have it on a standard setup rifle. So the Bullpup does move the bolt handle back. It's no big deal just to come back and grab that bolt handle. It is a big meaty handle, so it's an easy target to hit, and the action was very smooth. Now you saw earlier it bound up a little bit, and the reason is because I'm putting pressure on the bottom of this magazine. It's dragging on the bottom of the bolt, but if I lift it up a little bit, the bolt slides very smoothly. So the support side shooting was a little bit of an issue compared to a standard bolt gun, but it wasn't a disqualifying issue. I wouldn't say, hey, you know, don't get the gun because that support side shooting is more difficult. So that worked out just fine for us. The one point that I really will take some points away from the SRS A1 is the trigger. The trigger has it's a single stage trigger, but it has a little bit of creep beforehand. And that creep can be very distracting if you're trying to make very, very precise shots, like when you're shooting groups for accuracy. The trigger has a little bit of an inconsistent creep to it, what we found. When you start applying pressure, there are times where you will actually feel the trigger move very slightly. And if you're concentrating, you can actually move it and then stop it. But then it may take just a hair's breadth more to break the trigger, or it may take a little bit more weight to break the trigger. It wasn't consistent on exactly how much more pressure you needed to apply to break the trigger. Other times, as soon as you'd start applying pressure, it would move and break. So it was just slightly inconsistent. Now I say slightly because the reality is, if I was shooting this on the clock, I would probably not notice it at all. But we did not get a chance to shoot moving targets with this either, which moving targets is one of those places where a clean and repeatable trigger is absolutely critical, because you have to know exactly when that shot is going to break when you're shooting movers. So the trigger is not as clean as most of the bolt guns out there. It was fairly light. It is an adjustable trigger, so you can do some things with it, but again, you're just going to have to live with a little bit of creep, and that is inherent in most Bullpup systems. You have a considerable amount of linkage in order to get back to the bolt where you're going to release that striker. So there are more parts, there are longer runs of parts. So to get a very clean, very crisp trigger is difficult in a Bullpup design, and it's one of the things, again, that you accept. Now, some of the other features that we have on the Desert Tech SRS A1 is an adjustable length of pull by utilizing these spacers in here. And the spacers are very easy to operate. There are little levers underneath that you depress and then you push up. Sometimes they can be a little difficult, but that's okay because you don't want them to accidentally come off. Push up on the stock, down on the spacers, and they pop off. So you have this nice little spacer pack, and you have a nice cushioned rubber butt pad. And one thing that I do like that they did on the SRS A1 is the butt pad is raised up a little bit. So you'll notice that when I put it back on here, the heel of the butt pad is up higher, and that works out really well for prone shooting, where your shoulder pocket ends up being a little bit higher than on traditional rifles. Now, the elevation of the butt pad is not adjustable, so you cannot slide the butt pad up or down. Also, you do not have any ability to turn the butt pad side to side. I would really like to see that on future models, the ability to run an adjustable butt pad in here, so you can cant it from side to side or raise it up or down however you see fit. But it was perfectly workable the way it is. The A1 SRS has an adjustable comb. Again, the comb, because of the way the bolt runs, really the adjustable comb is only on the left-hand side, or right hand for the left-handed model, and you have 2 screws to adjust the height of the pad. It's very easy. It has a kind of a tongue and groove type system to lock the pad in, so once you loosen those screws and get it to where it needs to be and tighten them down, it's not going to move anywhere. It is flush right now with the rest of the receiver, but the pad actually can go down a couple of notches and it can come up a little bit. So you are good to go on the adjustment. Now, we are running the Night Force ATACR F1 with this big 56mm objective on here and an AR height mounting platform, and that works out just perfect for the cheek, the comb on the A1, at least for me, and I do have a little bit more room that I could move up or down on it. So AR height mounting systems will be good to go on the SRS A1. Let's talk about the magazine very quickly. Now, because the barrels that we do have for the SRS A1 here are both short actions, they are the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor, we have a short action 10-round magazine. Now, the magazine does look a little funky because it has this notch here, and then it goes down to a standard short action width. This is a single stack magazine, so all your cartridges are in a row. And this little notch here is necessary to move the whole magazine forward in the magazine well to get the cartridges to line up where they need to line up. The magazine is really interesting because unlike most magazines that are more box-shaped, the SRS magazine is narrow at the front to accommodate the projectiles. Then you have a widening area right here to grab the shoulder. And then of course you have a large area back here for the body of the cartridge. And it does a good job of not allowing the cartridges to slide forward and slam the bullet into the front edge of the magazine under recoil. So I thought that was kind of a neat design. It puts that recoil force on the shoulder of the cartridge instead of on the tip of the bullet. Now, one drawback is the magazine is a little bit more difficult to load than double stack magazines where you just push the cartridge down through the top, or than a lot of the single feed double stack magazines that we have on other systems. It has these tabs here that you have to really get the head of the cartridge underneath and then push back, and when you have a cartridge already in here, you're basically trying to push the base of the cartridge against the ramped shoulder of the previous cartridge to get it in. So it is one of those situations where you have to take your finger and stick it down through here and push the top cartridge down to feed the next cartridge in. And I don't have Mongo huge hands, but my fingers just really barely fit in here to be able to do that. So loading the magazines are not as fast as other systems, but again, that shouldn't be something that stops you from buying it, just something that you need to keep in mind. Now, the length of the magazine is to be able to accommodate long action calibers. So if you have a long action in here, then your magazine will not have this notch in here. It will be straight from the back to accommodate long action and Magnum cartridges. The magazine did latch in very easily and very tightly, but as I demonstrated, when there is no pressure on the magazine, the bolt runs smoothly. If you put pressure on the magazine, the bolt drags on the mag. So keep that in mind in a shooting position. You don't want to have the magazine pushing up into the action because it will cause your bolt action to be very, very slow. The SRS A1 does have a butt spike stowed in here, which is a really, really nice feature, and we used it for all of our group shooting. It comes down and it does have a pad on the bottom that spins. So when you have the butt spike on the ground and you go to turn it to adjust your elevation, then the pad that is actually in contact with the ground will rotate and allow the dial here to spin freely. It worked very well. I was very happy to have it. We didn't have any real hop induced in the system because of this. It is a really wide, flat area that should work well on quite a few surfaces. Obviously, soft mud it's not going to work well in, but it should work well in gravel, rocks, across the hood of a vehicle. Just about anything that you're going to find yourself in, then the butt spike will work well. You also have a really nice notch back here for your support side hand to go back and grab a hold of, and it was really comfortable shooting the system overall. Now the pistol grip is kind of bulbous here. It fits some hands, doesn't fit others, but I think most guys are going to float same side thumb on this, so the size of the back of the pistol grip is really not that big of a deal. The safety selector is directly above the trigger, and the safety worked just fine on the system. It was easy to access with my trigger finger to get it in safe or to get it into fire, so that was no problem whatsoever. One thing that I really did take a little bit of time to get used to was single loading the system. Since you are running a 10-round magazine, there may be times when you either have a 12-round stage, or you have a miss and a pickup, or you have to eject a bad round and reload one, and you may actually have to throw a cartridge in there and single load. Well, you have this really large open area that makes it easy to drop a cartridge in, especially if you're running a short action cartridge in the SRS A1. But what I found, especially with the 6.5 Creedmoor, if you just throw the cartridge in and try to run the bolt forward, the cartridge will jam up and it will not allow you to run the bolt forward. What you have to do instead is you have to come a little bit further up on here, and you actually have to nose the cartridge in past the barrel extension and then drop it, and then close the bolt. As long as you get the cartridge nose in past the barrel extension, then you can go ahead and single feed with no problem. And it just took a couple of times doing that to get used to exactly where I had to have the cartridge in relation to the side of the receiver before I let it go and slam the bolt closed. So that will take a little bit of practice, but you can single feed with no problem whatsoever. So overall, how does the Desert Tech SRS A1 work for competition shooting or law enforcement? Well, I would say if you are looking at the SRS A1 from a competition standpoint, there are some issues that are going to cause you problems in competition. And the main one is being able to switch to that support side very quickly. Now, you do have a benefit on the competition side is you can run a longer barrel in a shorter overall package. And if you decide to run suppressed, you can run a longer suppressed barrel in a shorter overall package compared to traditional oriented bolt guns. So in that aspect, that's great. Now, of course, the drawback is the magazine systems right now. 10-round magazines are the most that you can get in the SRS A1 setup. And if you are running a PRS style competition, you may want those extra rounds in the magazine as just a safety, or when you run stages that may require more than 10 rounds. Just know on the SRS A1, you're going to have to perform a magazine change, or you're going to have to run those single loaded after that. Whereas with a traditional bolt action rifle that runs, for instance, AICS pattern magazines, then you can get magazine extensions or higher capacity magazines for those systems. Now, in a law enforcement aspect, things change a little bit. I think this is an excellent overall platform from a law enforcement aspect because you do have a smaller setup. Desert Tech also has the SRS Covert, which you can run a 16-inch 308 barrel and get a very small overall platform. Now, where the small overall length really helps in law enforcement is if you have to do a low-profile insert, if you're working out of vehicle hides, or you're working out of any kind of building hide where you just have a really small compact area to work in. Also working from windows, working from firing ports. It really allows you to get a little bit closer to that port without protruding outside of it. And it really can just help in your overall ability to get the rifle in the position that you need it to be in. And a 16-inch barrel really is not a deficit for law enforcement due to the short compressed engagement distances that most law enforcement agencies will find them in. Additionally, when you get to the end of life for that barrel, instead of having to replace the whole overall system, you can just replace the barrel and be good to go. So for a law enforcement situation, I think the Desert Tech SRS A1 is a very good option if your department has the budget for these types of rifles. As far as the drawbacks, there really are only a few small points that I really disliked about the overall rifle. One, again, being the trigger. I really wish they could clean the trigger up, but I think they've probably done as much as they can do so far with that trigger. And then lastly, we'll come to the forend. Again, this is the standard SRS A1 model. There is a covert available that has a shorter forend to accommodate a shorter barrel. But they utilize a proprietary rail mounting system here with threaded holes. I would really like to see this go to an M-LOK type system so you can utilize a whole lot more of the accessories that are out on the market. I do like the fact that they have QD placements already in the forend, so you can attach a sling there. But I dislike the rear QDs. They protrude out from the side of the stock, and I do end up finding them catching on things or mashing into your body. If the buttstock slams into your side and you catch one of these extended QDs in the ribs, it's really not comfortable. So if you're really trying to move the gun around quickly and get around barricades, slamming one of these QDs into you can really wake you up. But overall, I think it's a really great system. It definitely is eye-catching at the range. Every time we had this out, people would come up to us asking us what this was and what kind of system it was. Of course, the looks overall can cause you problems if you live in Australia, specifically New South Wales. They apparently have worked on banning the Desert Tech SRS A1 because it appears very similar to a semi-automatic rifle that is already banned. So a little bit of craziness there, and it was one point that the looks of the rifle work against it. but here in the US, as far as I'm aware, no states have tried to ban it based upon its looks alone. So that is a good thing. One last thing, I will talk about an accessory that is made for the Desert Tech SRS A1. Really Right Stuff has a Arca Swiss adapter for the SRS A1 that bolts in right forward of the trigger guard here. And it solves one very small problem working with the SRS A1 off of a barricade. You don't have a really hard barricade stop here. You can run the trigger guard up against a barricade, but that really puts the rifle a little bit closer than I would want to the barricade. And you also have this bump here at the front edge of the polymer section going into the handguard, and this is not going to ride barricades smoothly. So you can add one of the Really Right Stuff Arca Swiss adapters, and that will give you a little bit lower flat platform with a Arca rail on it that will allow you to snap onto their tripod very easily, but it also gives you a hard 90-degree angle front edge on it that will work very well as a barricade stop, and it will let you get the barricade a little bit further forward on it. So just something to consider if you think you would run this on barricades or run it off a tripod. The Really Right Stuff adapter is a great item for that, and it just screws right into the threaded holes on the fore end and extends back, and there's no modification to the rifle itself. So if you decide to take it off later, you haven't altered the system, and it will be in its original configuration. Because we switched between two short action barrels, we were able to utilize the same bolt and the same magazine. Now, if you do decide to go to a separate system, for instance, a long action Magnum, then you will need a different bolt and a different magazine, and there will also be a different spacer that goes into the buttstock here that alters how far the bolt comes back. So you do need to factor in not just the cost of a replacement barrel, but a replacement bolt and magazine when you're looking at switching calibers outside of that same caliber envelope. Now, if you're running a 308 bolt face and you decide to switch to another caliber that is same 308 bolt face and same length, then you're good to go. You're probably going to be able to utilize the same magazine as well, so it really reduces that overall cost. And a final before we end, a final issue with the SRS A1 is it does use a proprietary barrel extension. Now, there are a couple of options to purchase that barrel extension, but pretty much your source for barrels for the SRS A1 is going to be Desert Tech.